This is from Angel, and he says, if the Dodgers can land Marcus Stroman, or Shane Bieber, they'll be good to go, and one of the favorites in the NL.
Yeah, and they're going to have to trade one of the young guys, and it's not going to be Bobby Miller, and I seriously doubt it's going to be Everett Sheehan, but one of those other kids, whether it's Pepio or Grove, would probably wind up going with another prospect. And I don't think they're getting Giolito on a one-year rental. I think they would try to sign him to an extension. I like Bieber a great deal. I think he's vastly underrated. I think he's a pretty good pitcher. Stroman, I don't know which is the Marcus Stroman, because he's been with 3 different ball clubs now, and he's had those flash years, and this is one of them at Wrigley Field, but he's never shown real consistency. And are you going to pay him mega money if you're not sure you're going to get this type of productivity on a year-by-year basis? What would you do?
They've got to make a deal to get his pitcher. I mean, they have to do it. And they've got assets. And the Dodgers have a good farm program, so they're always going to be developing new kids. They got a division championship opportunity staring them right in the nose. The Padres can't figure out what they're doing. And you've really only got Arizona and San Francisco to contend with. I mean, I think the door's open.
Okay, we move on. Next question on Fans Forum.
Okay, let's go here to Pedro Rosario. He says, yeah, Ohtani looks happy in Anaheim. He ain't going nowhere. Would devastate those kids and Japanese fans to show up every day. Just went to the Yankees game last Tuesday.
There's no doubt that this is a special human being. I went back and dug up. In 1920, the Red Sox traded Babe Ruth to the Yankees. $125,000 cash, which was a phenomenal amount of money in 1920, plus a $300,000 loan and some players that went to Fenway Park. Obviously, we know what Ruth's career turned into. This would probably be tantamount to something like that. Now, Ohtani is not young. I think he's 28 now, but he's been here 6 years in Anaheim. And I was trying to think, if I were an Angel fan, would I be steamed at the owner, or would I just be steamed at the business of baseball? Surely wouldn't be steamed at Ohtani. My gut feel is, and maybe I've flipped on this a little bit, is let's just say thanks, because he came to Angel Stadium on a low price contract. He could have had more money to go other places. And he's done a phenomenal job for them. He's the most unique individual, Joe. You talk about the workload he carries, and he never takes a day off. He's in the lineup every day as a DH, and he pitches once a week, and there's all sidebar preparation for that. He's just a special individual. I can't imagine how he's not fatigued physically, and now maybe not emotionally, just with the burden of expectation of, you got to do this to get the Angels in the playoffs. And by the way, what are you going to do in free agency? He doesn't want to talk about it. So I just say thanks. But we've been honored to see something really special we're probably never, ever going to see in our lifetime again.
But he's an amazing player and an amazing man. But isn't amazing how the Angels have had Trout and Ohtani, arguably the 2 best players in the sport, and they can't make the playoffs. I mean, that's another mind-boggling thing, like trying to figure out the Padres this year. So it's just things just sometimes just don't make sense.
Well, injuries, bad drafts, drug problems, a pitcher who died.
Yeah.
Actually, 2 pitchers who died. So franchise is cursed. And I said this last week on TV on KUSI in the Saturday package I do. If they put out a press release that Shohei Ohtani's been traded, the next press release should be that Artie Moreno is selling the franchise, because I don't think he'll ever be forgiven. That being said, he tried really hard, and that's a great player that we've had a privilege to watch. I stopped doing whatever I'm doing when he's coming up the plate or when he's pitching, just to observe, because we won't see this. I don't think we'll ever see this again.
Yeah, well, you bring up the Red Sox owner trading Babe Ruth. It is kind of like that. Yep. And you don't want to go down in the history books as the guy that let him go.
Okay, on we go.
Okay, this is another one here from Pedro. He says, the local radio shows need to call Hacksaw for a weekly Baja to the Canadian Rockies sports update. So bland and repetitive, no soul in today's San Diego sports radio.
Well, the landscape has changed. Thank you. You are right. I am bleeping brilliant. I miss it. I worked really hard at it. Now that I reflect back, and John and I have talked over coffee a couple of times, I don't know how the hell I did what I did for 28 years, because I was doing 4 hours of sports talk every day. I produced all my own show, which was about 25 guests a week. And I was doing the Aztecs and USC football on Saturday, and I did the Chargers, and then I did the Seahawks on Sunday. And I was meeting myself coming and going in the airport all the time. It was just, I'd look back and I say, how the hell did I do all that? Because there's a ton of preparation involved. It's not like dude just doesn't show up and open the phones and do 4 hours.
No.
I mean, where do you think these 25 guests per week came from and all that? So I enjoyed it. It's just a different landscape now. I have no doubt that if I came back, it'd be very different from anything else that's on the air, and it'd be bleeping brilliant. I promise you.
Yeah, of course it would. We get to see on TV, on weekends on KUSI, and that's terrific. But, the local sports talk is some of those guys are pretty good, and some of them are kind of rookies. They're learning on the job. But the stations don't have the power that 690 had, like up to the Canadian Rockies. I mean, it was just a force.
Well, we were the first to do it.
Yeah.
So we were the first one through the wall, and this is who we are, and this is our flag, and this is our style. And we had a brilliant team of guys. And I'll be honest with you, I think there's a hole in the heart of the market since Spanos took the Chargers out of here. I just emotionally, John, just don't think it's the same marketplace anymore any longer. And obviously the Padres now are the show in town. And I don't see an awful lot of brass of anybody on the radio right now wanting to stand up and make statements about this Padre team being sub 500, 100 games into the season. You got to speak the truth if you're going to do this the right way, rather than shish goom ba, cheer for home for the home team. Can't do that. At least I wouldn't do it. Anyhow, that's where we are. Next question.
Okay, and this is a comment here from Arthur, and he's talking. I think this is about Mbappe. He says, "Buying anyone you want defeats balanced competition, which is what sports is supposed to be about."
Well, if you've got what's called in pro soccer, it's called the fair play rules, which is in essence, it's a salary lid. But that's for the English Premier League. But if you're going to allow the Saudis to come in and to cherry pick the great players from Spain or Italy or the EPL and take them back there at inordinate prices, what does it do to the leagues that are strip mined of their talent? Like I said, I've counted 11 English Premier League players who have signed to go to Saudi Arabia in this transfer window. And we're not talking about scrubs. We're talking about significant talent, whether it's a keeper, a striker, a midfielder, and they're all getting paid 73 million or 38 million, which, because of the fair play rule in England, it's a salary cap. So I think it damages the integrity of the leagues to allow this to happen. But how do you fight it? Saudis are making up their rules as they go.
Yeah, it's tough to fight it because, in the world of business, you would expect there's going to be a lot of dynamic movement, people making as much as they can. But sports is different because you want to have that competitive nature. The NFL has proven it. They have a league of parity, and overall that league does really well. So you want to have, some sort of competitive balance, because it's almost like the F1 situation with Verstappen. They won 10 of 12. It kind of doesn't make the sport as exciting when you have such a dominant team or a dominant player spending whatever it takes.
This is your segment, Fans Forum. We've got a couple more questions here we'll run through.
Yeah, we do. So this is the comments here. Pedro has another follow-up. He says, exactly. Hacksaw hit the nail on the head. Exactly what's wrong with today's radio. Afraid to investigate what's wrong with the Padres and get their credentials stripped. So I don't know. People are piling on.
All right, we move on.
Okay, let's go to some of the social media comments and get some of these guys involved. There's just so much, Hacksaw. We've got a lot of live stream viewers watching today. Let's see if we can get in. And here, let's talk a little bit about Bob Melvin. And this is from Instagram, Dave Meyer. He says, think the question is Melvin the guy to lead this team? Yes, he has done very well with the A's, but those guys were not the same caliber players we have. In my opinion, he seems too passive of a manager for a team with this star power. Too many times he's gone to the pen with a lead and knowing they have struggled and let them blow a lead. Even if we had won half the games we blew in the seventh or later, we would be 8 games over 500. Maybe a manager change is needed before the deadline and not new players.
It has been intimated to me by people that I believe know some unique things inside that clubhouse that the general manager has leaned on the manager not to beat up these players. The players are running the franchise, not the manager in the dugout. That's what was inferred to me by somebody that I think has a better handle. So if AJ Preller has inferred to Bob Melvin, you are not going to bash Machado and you're not going to bash Soto. Now the manager's lost a little bit of his ability to run the clubhouse and run the dugout the way it should be. That's just what's been inferred to me if I connect the dots based on what I've been told. And then if you add in the analytics that you will play this guy and this is the batting order and this is the rotation, now you got a robo manager who's pushing the buttons that the people upstairs in analytics told him to push. I don't know that Bob Melvin would quit. I don't know if they want to fire Bob Melvin, but if that's what's happening there, that might be the only explanation as to why the hell there's no leadership and there's no fire. I mean, for Melvin to have to continue, this is a third time in about a month where he raises the question about focus and intensity and fire. That falls on the players, but if he's not allowed to land on the players with both feet, that you're going to do this. Can you imagine somebody telling Buck Showalter, you're not going to press these guys' buttons?
Yeah.
That's what's been inferred to me. The more I thought about it this weekend as we went through another miserable end of a series, losing again to another sub-500 team at AAA pitching staffs. How is this humanly possible? So they may deny it. Nobody wants to answer that question. I don't know anybody's asking that question. They probably should. But there's something significantly wrong in that dugout, in that clubhouse at Petco Park.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about, is it player leadership? Is it the manager? Is it the general manager? It is a leadership issue because they have the talent. They've got all the pieces to make this work. You watch those post-game pressers with Bob Melvin, and you can tell that
he's restrained.
Yes. And you could tell that he's being careful in the words he uses because he can't throw anyone under the bus. But then he makes questionable decisions. I mean, just a few nights ago, Luis Campusano had, 3 or 4 hits in a game. He had a great game. And the next game they sit him and they bat Matt Carpenter, who's hitting $150?
2 for 32 last I checked.
Yeah. So sometimes you look at these decisions. I can't imagine that Preller and his analytics guys are saying, sit Campusano and put Carpenter back in as DH, right?
We'll find out when we get to the finish line. And, you like to bring up Manny Machado's quote, look at the back of the baseball card. Well, the back of the baseball card says you're still 10 games back and you're 7th in the wild card race fighting for 3 positions.
Jeez. Yeah. So
okay.
Here's another comment here. This is about the Women's World Cup. This is from the All-American Joe. He says, Lee, you know darn well you're missing a key factor. Men's World Cup brought in $7.5 billion in revenue. The 2019 Women's World Cup brought in $300 million. The public isn't buying it unless you speak the full truth.
Well, the full truth is the men's program goes back into the 1930s. Women's program has only grown by leaps and bounds, maybe in the last decade or so. And we talked this past week, why is Team USA so good? Title IX, college athletics, what it's meant in terms of the development. You don't see that in Ethiopia, and you don't see that in England or Ireland. Those programs will come along as they funnel more money in. And the All-American Joe is correct that the men's side, because of its history and legacy, generates phenomenal amounts of revenue, TV contracts, advertising, marketing campaigns and contracts, things of that nature, sponsorships. The women are starting to grow there, but they're not there because the red, white, and blue is really the only legitimate one globally that's done it back to back. It will come as it goes. But that being said, the women, I don't know if they're going to unionize, but the women need to be paid more collectively, the 32 teams, compared to the men. And for those who are on the live stream are not aware of what we're talking about, the men's World Cup teams have a pot of gold of $440 million. The women's are being paid $110 million. And now the women have taken a bit of a bump in the last couple of World Cups. The men, obviously, because of its heritage and going back to the 1930s, obviously are earning a lot more money. There'll be some balance that I think it'll continue to grow, but they're not going to go 400 to each side
Right,
immediately. They're going to
right.
have to work their way through it. But I mean, he raises a valid point. I'm just telling you why the USA is dominated and what has to happen next globally.
Yeah, I thought your take on the Title IX, that would kind of open my eyes a bit of what gives America a strategic advantage in the women's program. But yeah, the revenue is like apples and oranges. I mean, it's not even comparable. So as much as we'd like to see the women have success and win a third in a row, and we hope they make as much money as they can, the reality is that their pie is a smaller pie.
And FIFA last week announced we had struggles to try to get TV contracts with the women's games in Australia and New Zealand. And they've not sold out all these games. They're giving away gobs of free tickets for people to come sample the product. So it's been, on the women's side, it's been slow growth. Okay, we've got a couple more here before we put a lid on this.
Okay. And here we'll talk. This is kind of a long one. Talk about the Pac-12. And this is from M. Doherty. He says, I think the points about not expanding are mostly spot on, but I'm not sure where the money is coming from for the conference. People forget the CW, as of September 1st, will not have affiliates in Seattle or Sacramento as of when this comment is made. I know you can stream for free, but that is not linear in these markets. The network is not paying for LIV Golf, and the terms of its ACC deal have not been disclosed. But remembering those were games that had been passed down to the RENs previously, Tier 3. It's doubtful the money is high. As for Apple, it pays $250 million a year for all of MLS, charges people about $100 a year to watch it, except for a few matches it subcontracts to Fox. So that's not a panacea, either way, from a financial or a distribution perspective.
Well, you're correct, but I will tell you that Sinclair and these other groups that own CW are now awakened to the fact live sports draws people.
Yeah.
And it draws the ability for us to sell inventory in those broadcasts. So now we are willing to make the investment. And if CW is the third partner, I mean, there's no doubt that ESPN, Disney, whoever is carrying is going to get first choice of games. But there will be games and there will be a price tag impacted to the second tier of games or even the third tier of games. It's not going to be like the ACC CW contract, which is getting the bottom teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference on a Saturday night. It's complex. We'll just wait and see what the partnership looks like if it gets announced in the next 2 to 3 weeks and what the dollar value is. But if you take what Kliavkoff said, face value, he said the landscape has changed. The tone of the conversations has just changed. And ESPN is getting involved in other partnerships now with other sports, which would mean maybe more money's available. Maybe there is going to be some type of Disney input into this deal. It's so deep. It's so complex. Take a deep breath. We'll see what 3 weeks from now. By the way, this doesn't happen until after the 23-24 season.
Well, do you think the Pac-12 is at a disadvantage because they're on the West Coast and the games are so late for all the Eastern sports fans?
They are, but there's ways around that. You can do early games out here. You can do Friday night games out here. You can position to play at 5 in Corvallis, Oregon, if it's a game of importance, which is 8 o'clock in the Eastern Seaboard. You can jury rig the schedule to make it fit to serve all partners. I'll guarantee you in the Pac-12 or the Pac-10, what our new conference will look like. I will watch a game at 5 p.m., Oregon, Washington, whomever, because it's Pac-12 and I like Pac-12. And if it's 8 o'clock East Coast time for the TV viewers back there, that's not bad. I can do that. Now, I don't know that I want to watch games at 9 a.m. out here on the West Coast so we can get in the 12 noon window on the Eastern Seaboard. But it's a juggling match. They'll find a way, and we'll just see if there's more unique TV partners that now come front and center that want to be part of this.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how they're going to do this. I mean, think about the Mountain West and some of the game times they get. I mean, they get pushed to the back of the bus. So I'm sure the Pac-10 will work something out, but I'm just the interesting dynamics. I mean, 2/3 of America lives on the eastern side of the Mississippi, so it's different on the West Coast.
Okay, let's take one more here before we put a lid on this.
Okay, before we put a lid on it, and let's go to, I got another Padre comment here. We'll go with this one here about Musgrove and Machado. This is from Manny Motorola. He says, no doubt Joe is a leader on the team. Manny can carry this team. Not sure if he's taken on the outspoken leader role yet. You'd think with all this talent and experience, the role of a leader wouldn't be as needed as on a club with rookies and first and second year guys.
Well, you got 4 stars and then you got the rest of the roster, and the 4 stars are making all the money, and that's one of the problems the team has. Musgrove is, I think, the verbal leader of the team, but that's on the pitching staff. I don't know that he can go hold a clubhouse meeting. Maybe he can and say, we need to be doing this. You need to be doing this, Manny or Fernando or whomever. But the problem is the makeup of the roster, in which the 4 guys, the Fab Four, got all the money, and all the rest of the guys are all hitting in the 220s and 230s or the 210s. And that's a big problem. There's too many substandard players there right now. And then you complement it by the fact we got some guys having crummy seasons. I mean, what's happened to Cronenworth is a mystery to me, except that maybe they've figured him out. And Hassan Kim has been spectacular. He's outside of El Nino. I think HSK is the second most popular player. And in terms of the pitching staff, there's a language issue. Darvish does not want to learn English. Sadly, I think he'd be a marketing whiz if he did. Snell is introverted. Musgrove is loud. And then they've just got so many guys who are in and out of the pitching staff, and Hader's not a great quote per se. So it's just a weird dynamic of things that are missing from what you normally think. I mean, I go back to think of some glory Padre teams that I was in and around all the time. And Tony Gwynn was vocal. Mm-hmm. Caminetti was vocal. And Greg Vaughn was strong and stoic. And Andy Bennis had real strong opinions. It's just a different clubhouse right now. And I don't know if the money's changed it or ruined it, or it's just not the same team. 1 to 25 on the roster.
Yeah, it's just such a weird thing to figure this out, because there's no one on this team like, Big Poppy or Willie Stargell that was that veteran leader. I mean, I think they were hoping they were going to get that from Nelson Cruz, but that never worked out. So yeah, it just seems kind of rudderless. And to your point, maybe Preller and his analytics guys are just meddling so much that they just can't find a way to launch.
Hey, listen, we hope you've enjoyed our podcast.